I'm now just going to talk quickly about the rules of the webinar itself. So with the exception of the panelists, all participants are on mute and their cameras are turned off. If you have any questions, please type it into the Q&A. That's at the bottom of your screen. You'll see things that's just called Q&A. Type your question into there. It's at the bottom of your screen. At the end of the presentation, the panelists will work their way through the questions you have submitted. The webinar will be loaded to the Hazelmere Hub website for future reference. And as I've said, it'll run for approximately 60 minutes. The panel consists of myself as a facilitator, Joshua Carmody, who's a town planner from Planning Solutions, Ross Barnavidis, who's a construction manager from MV Group, and Charlie Barber, who is the independent auditor from Australian Environmental Auditors. Okay, so a little bit of background. I understand some of you will be very familiar with Lot 20, but other people may have been recent arrivals to the area and may not have that level of background. So remediation and redevelopment of a 16 hectares of land. It's previously used for mining and also landfill. So the proposed development is of commercial and light industrial lots and a linear strip of residential lots, which will complete the Adelaide Street neighbourhood streetscape. In March 2025, we spoke to businesses and residents adjacent to Lot 20, and there were three key messages that we heard. The project must prioritise community safety by managing construction impacts, including dust, noise, rubbish, odours and debris from entering private property. The existing traffic issues, including the heavy vehicle use of Adelaide Street, the destruction of verges, this can't be made any worse by the project. And most importantly, the traffic calming measures that are in place need to be retained. And then finally, the project should enhance the visual appeal of the street, including visual breaks such as trees between the proposed strip of houses and the light industrial buildings that will be built behind. So the site has been in a contaminated, unremediated state since its closure as a tip 30 years ago. In its current condition, the site is a local eyesore, it's a safety and security risk and a fire hazard. Basically, it can't stay as it is. The site has been transferred into private ownership. The key barriers to remediating the site earlier have included gaining clarity around what was deposited at the old tip. So this has been following extensive ground testing over several years. We now have an understanding of what's in the ground. Stakeholder opposition to the development proposal. So we believe the residential strip, along with Adelaide Street and a dedicated access road via Stirling Crescent, will address those concerns to the development of the lot, and community concern regarding the safety of the remediation process. So the remediation methodology has been completely reworked in response to the concerns that were raised previously by the residents. So the approach to remediation and development, so it's going to be delivered over 3 stages. The first stage will level and cap the site. So basically when we say cap, it's going to be sealed would be the wrong word, but effectively using rubble and rocks from the area on top of soil, which creates a cap on the site. That will take an estimated 12 months. The second stage will involve testing to confirm the leveled land is suitable for its intended use. This will take another 6 to 12 months. The final stage is construction of buildings on site. So if we're looking at that, we're looking anywhere between 18 to 2 years from the commencement of work on the site. Okay, what I'm going to do now is hand over to Joshua Carmody from Planning Solutions, and he's just going to talk about the future vision of the site.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be discussing what is generally a very popular subject, town planning. So look, to take a step back in 2011, I think it was, the general structure planning for this area, for this particular site and the precinct, which was done by the State Planning Commission. The general concept that was agreed upon was that there would be a residential interface. So we would have light industrial land uses to the rear of these sites. They would be able to access the rest of the industrial area via a new road. So that would keep all the heavy traffic away from Adelaide Street. Any trucks and vehicles like that. And then there would be sorry, we'll just jump back a slide. Yeah. And then there would be what was known at the time as composite industrial. So it's relatively rare now, but the Borello beef site, which you'll be familiar with, is an example of what used to be a composite industrial site. So people live in a house on the property, and then to the rear they have a warehouse or something to that nature. That's not a normal form of development anymore. And for that reason, about 10 years or so ago, the City of Swan decided to move away from that concept. Now, as a result of the engagement with the community, our client, the developer behind this project, is committed to delivering that residential interface on his property. It's a better outcome for the community. It allows the streetscape of Adelaide Street to be completed with the residential sites fronting the existing properties. And now we can maybe jump to the next slide, Jamie. Yeah, so we can envisage a future streetscape which resembles more like this. Now, this, again, it's only a concept. There have been some changes, which I'll talk about in a minute, to the concept. But essentially, this is the vision: residential facing residential. Now, from a planning perspective, one of the main considerations in putting forward something like this is making sure that those new residential properties don't experience any negative impacts from the industrial land to the rear. So that might be lights, it might be the noise of trucks delivering things. To be honest, those are two main things. This area is predominantly logistics and warehousing, so we haven't identified many other impacts that people might be concerned about. So, lights, noise, vibration. Let me just jump to the next slide, Jamie. So the concept that's currently being advanced, and to be clear, none of this is not set in stone, because these things evolve as we go through the process. But the concept which is being developed is based around rear-loaded residential lots. And you might have seen these in some of the newer subdivision areas, some of the greenfield sites. So it's a relatively narrow sort of townhouse building footprint with a garage located to the rear, which has access from a rear laneway. What that allows is it improves the streetscape from Adelaide Street, because essentially there's no garages, but it also has a big advantage of allowing the garage itself to function like an acoustic wall, like an acoustic barrier. And so that provides an interface combined with the sort of separation which is achieved by the laneway road itself. And then you can see behind the laneway there would be a standard fence, and there'd be a landscaping row of substantial trees, which also provide a further interface. Jamie, if you just jump to the next slide, I'll just provide an example of another area in the metropolitan, an example of this kind of interface being used in a similar circumstance elsewhere. So up in Butler, you can see here that there's a major commercial development with a rear laneway and rear loaded houses backing onto it. And so you can get a sense from both those Google Street View photos of what the laneway itself might look like. And you also get a sense of the streetscape, how you can get really quite a nice streetscape that's not dominated by cars, and which has these sort of townhouse style units. So this is part of the planning and the structure planning for the site, which is currently being progressed. Now, there's obviously multiple stages that have to go into this from a planning perspective. That includes the site has to be rezoned in such a way to make this interface concept possible. When those processes take place, the rezoning, each step of the process generally will have additional public consultations. So the City of Swan itself will be required to advertise these proposals to the local community, to the residents, and it's pretty important just to point out that we have, because there's there's obviously a local government boundary that runs down along Adelaide Street. So we've got the City of Swan that's assessing these things, but then we've got the City of Kalamunda where the residents are located. So we have actually met with the City of Kalamunda, and we have said to them that we would be requesting the City of Swan to make sure that they consult with the residents. Despite sometimes what happens is local governments, they don't, because they don't have the same database and resident details, they won't always advertise to residents that are across a boundary. But we've said that we requested that takes place. So there'll be multiple stages in the planning process where community inputs can be received and formally considered by the decision makers. Throughout the process, at every stage, whether it's a rezoning, a structure plan, or ultimately actual development on the site, at each stage in the process, the decision maker is required to consider community views. They're required to consider any impact that the development or the planning proposal itself may have. Now, not all things may be considered in the same way at each stage. So what I'm getting at is in the current modelling that we're doing with the planning, we've worked out that if there is development on the industrial land, it'll be important to keep the truck movements around 70 metres away from the residents. So that would suggest designing loading bays and things at a distance of around 70 metres to mitigate against sound. That's a distance based on the most conservative assumptions, and that's what might find its way into a structure plan as it progresses to a development, which may be you have a higher level of detail when you actually assess a development. Those distances can adjust based on the actual operation of a business. I have spent about 8 of my 10 minutes. I think that's most of the planning considerations. I don't want to bore people unduly. Maybe I'll hand it on to the next presenter.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you very much, Josh. As I mentioned earlier, there's the opportunity to ask Josh questions relating to the development. Just use that Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen. Just hit that and type your question in, and we can come back to that question at the end of the presentation. I'd now like to introduce Ross. Ross is going to be the project manager for the works that are going to happen at the site. And Ross is the manager at MV Group. Ross, are you with us?
Yeah. Can you hear me, guys?
Yep, go for it.
Yep. Cheers, Josh. Cheers, Jamie. Good evening, everyone. Our company, MV Group, has been appointed to take care of the whole project on behalf of the developer. So our role is to carry out the physical site works in accordance with the approved project requirements and apply the controls that are required to deliver the project. So let's see what slide we got here. We're going to take out the earthworks over 12 months. There'll be a second phase of that, which will probably go for 6 months, which will be the validation of the ground, the approvals and what have you. During the time, the level of activity on site will vary depending on the stage of work being undertaken. Some of the stages will involve more active earthworks and machinery movements, while other stages will be more focused on preparation, monitoring, verification, and controlled progression through the site. MV Group's role is to deliver the project to those requirements. MV Group is a Western Australian contractor experienced in civil construction, bulk earthworks, and site development. We won't be taking on the project in isolation. The works will be carried out in coordination with the project manager, engineers, environmental consultants, and other specialists. That is important because the project being delivered under the approved framework is not an open-ended earth-moving exercise. The remediation work and the broader planning process will continue alongside each other. This allows the physical site works to move forward while the future development approvals and planning requirements continue through their own process. From our perspective, yep, next slide. Thanks, Jamie. So this slide shows the general sequence of how the works will progress. What we probably should have done there is split it up into those 6 sections. That's fine. I'll probably try and explain that in a bit more detail. So our first job is to set the job up. Fencing, controlled access, site parking, site amenities, and the site office will have their designated areas. Before any major earthworks commence, it is important that the site is secure, organised, and clearly set out. This ensures workers, machinery, deliveries, and visitors are managed through the correct access points and that the works are clearly separated from the general site facilities. So once the site has been established, one of our early priorities is to construct a separation berm, which is in the orange. The objective at that stage will be to expose the suitable site material to build that bund and get it up as soon as practical. If you see the yellow section on that slide, it says sand. So that's going to be our excavation point to begin the construction of the bund. The first job in exposing that sand will be to remove vegetation on that area, and there'll be a little bit of demolition involved with that as well. But yeah, exposing that sand, building that bund once we've secured the site is our first priority. Basically, the main objective of our works there is to not go ahead and open up the entire site as one big. So if you can imagine from the west side, splitting the project up into approximately 6 sections is what we intend to do. We intend to strip the vegetation, say on the far western end of the project, extract the sand, build the bund as I discussed previously, and then moving on to the second section, we'll start the demolition, vegetation strip, and progress into the remediation of the first section on the far western end. The idea of the berm that we are building is to create a separation between the housing and the adjacent businesses. We've chosen 4 meters based on the amount of material believed that is available coming out of that sand pit, and that'll be a height sufficient enough to, as we said, create a barrier between the residents and then the earthworks and the remediation that take place behind that. Once we've established that berm, there will be a layer of geotextile fabric placed over the berm. This will help control dust from that berm. Not that we expect there'll be too much coming from the rest of the project. Moving forward, as mentioned, we're going to begin the remediation works. So progressive is the term I want to focus on. We're not going to open up the entire site because that just increases the work area that we need to be dealing with. If we split it up into the sections that we're talking about, that's going to keep the work areas to a minimum and much easier to control. Our team, as they come onto site, I think we go to the next slide here, health and safety, please, Jamie. So all of our team that come onto site are trained in working in these type of projects. They appreciate that this is a complex operation. We may identify certain things on site, and if we do, our protocol is to basically stop, report anything we find to the environmental team, and basically follow procedures on what to do and how to handle it. If we encounter them, it'll be isolated, and we'll just progress working in other areas. Our responsibility is to protect our workforce, the surrounding community, and the environment while completing the work in accordance with the approved procedures. All our personnel will complete inductions, daily pre-start meetings will be held, active work areas will be restricted to authorised personnel only, machine will operate within designated zones, communication between operators, supervisors, and the project team will be maintained throughout the works. This is a normal part of working in a controlled project environment. MV has a strong safety-first culture, supported by experienced operators, documented procedures, and well-maintained equipment. We understand the sensitivity of this project. Our aim is to complete the work in a controlled, orderly, and professional manner while minimising unnecessary disruption to the surrounding area. As I said, we expect the first phase of the works to take 12 months. Secondary works from our side, the capping, compaction, validating of the finished surface, potentially another 6 months, and then there'll be further development, perhaps another 6 months beyond that. I think I'm now running out of time, so yeah, we're grateful for the opportunity, and we look forward to working with the Border project team and delivering the works in a safe manner. Thanks, Jack.
Cool. Thank you very much, Ross. Ross, I just want to clarify. I just want to go back to this screen here. You were using the term bund and berm interchangeably. I just want to confirm with everybody they are interchangeable terms. So where it says bund across the width of the site, it's also a berm, which is what Russ was referring to. Effectively, it's the 4 metre high physical barrier that he's referring to there. There's a small section of it down near the site office, which isn't 4 metre high. It's about 2.5. It's about 2.5 meters high with a fence on top of it as well. So yeah, that terminology is interchangeable.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Not a problem at all.
The key being there, guys, is that there will be that separation. 4 meters is high enough where you virtually won't see any activity behind that bund for the duration of the project once that's been established. So,
yeah, cool, fantastic. Thank you very much, Ross. Charlie, Charlie's the independent auditor for the job, and I'll hand over to you now, Charlie.
Okay, thank you and welcome everybody. Yes, I'm the independent auditor for this remediation project. So I'm accredited by the Department of Water and Environmental Regulations, or DWER. I was one of the first auditors appointed. I was working with DWER before 2019 when the audit system began. And I've got a bit of familiarity with this particular site historically too, having done audits in the early days before the project was abandoned, and then now rekindled. So I'm quite familiar with the site. I'm quite familiar with the audit system. So just to give you everybody an understanding, I act independently. I'm hired by the owner, but I report to the department. I review documents, I review work done in the field, I inspect work done in the field, and then I provide my opinion of those things to the department in a mandatory auditor's report. And so typically what would come out of a mandatory auditor's report, or a MAR, some of you are probably familiar with that term, would be a recommendation to reclassify the site for some typically more sensitive use. I've submitted a couple of MARs over the last year or so for this site that specifically did not recommend changes of classification because the site's not ready. So in consultations with DWER, what we've done here is we've broken in little pieces. So the first MAR that went in about a year ago was, or less than that, was to accept the overarching remedial action strategy. So the plan was submitted. I revised it, didn't revise it, questioned it. Was revised multiple times, having to talk through EMV and the owner about the practicalities of some of these things, and finally coming around a process that was suitable to get the job done. It's not overly complicated, but it does need to be performed in a very particular way to ensure uh, uh, two things. One, the safety of everyone involved and in the surrounds, but also it's working towards a MAR that will be able to allow me to recommend to DWIR to reclassify the site as being suitable for the intended purpose. So that MAR went in, and I had a condition on that MAR that said, look, that wrap's fine. I endorse the wrap, but only if a detailed construction environmental management plan is prepared and submitted under another MAR by myself or some other auditor to ensure that the details about the management, the monitoring, the reporting, like the day-to-day aspects of environmental oversight is already thought through. So that came out as a second MAR that I submitted just a week or two ago. So that MAR said, yep, the construction environmental management plan, or the CENP, and the attached sampling and analysis quality plan were up to snuff. And I submitted that also to council at the same time I submitted it to DWIR because they were interested. And I think I've put City of Swan there. I think I sent it to Calamunda. They seem to be a little more interested. But anyway, DWIR's got back and said, yeah, looks fine. They're sending it over to Department of Health. So all these MARs that the auditors send for a particular property with any sort of recommendation, once DWIR are happy with it, they send it over to Department of Health and make sure Health's happy with it. So that's the process. So as an independent fella, I'm really only making sure that it's done right and then recommending stuff to the government, and the government's basically saying okay, or what about this or what about that. So that CEMP and the SAQP, they provide the details on how that project's going to be safely completed. So as well as what I talked about, the management, monitoring, reporting, but it identifies who is going to do these things and what is their actual responsibility, and what sort of sampling is going to occur, and what sort of frequency, what's the criteria we're measuring it against, what's the contingencies if something like Ross indicated earlier, something comes up unexpected. So we have a process in place where Ross will, as there'll be an environmental consultant, it sort of lies, I guess, philosophically between Ross doing the work and myself doing the oversight, that's out there doing the day-to-day, sampling and monitoring and taking notes and taking photos. And if something strange happens, then they say, hey, what about this fella? And then they can advise, they shut down, they call me, they call whoever it is, depending on what the issue is. Next slide, please. So the wrap's been accepted, subject to an OK CEMP. Now, CEMP has now been submitted, and that's been accepted to DWIR and provided to DWIR, and only accepted basically on Friday with just a couple of questions. And Monday was a public holiday here, so I didn't update that slide. But DWIR's already given it the thumbs up and passed it on to Health. So it's a little more detailed than the wrap. So some of you may have got a copy of the wrap because we did send that out. The owner sent it to the council and I think some other people. But nobody else would have the CMP except council and DWR at the moment. But so the contractor will also be out there doing his work and be assisted by the oversight of a consultant who will be sort of working with myself and my team in the background to make sure the work's done sort of as per the plan. And understanding that it is an old landfill. I've worked in landfills for many, many years and safely moved them around and pecked on them and monitored them and whatnot. So it's a process, and sometimes you don't know what you're going to find, but we're not going to be digging deep. And I think what Ross said was very important. They're not going to open everything up all at once. It's going to be slow and steady, and that always wins the race. So we chisel away at it. I'd like to get going early here while it's still nice and wet, and then as the job progresses, if we need to tweak things, we will. It will be everybody be paying attention. We'll be paying attention, and we'll be adjusting as we go if we need to. And I think that's pretty much a wrap for me. I don't know how many minutes that is, but
No, you've done well. There's a couple of other slides. Did you want to touch on?
I sure can. Yeah. Okay, so these are some of the things that we're particularly interested in, and I don't think this will surprise anybody. But dust, and so there's dust monitors around will be set around the site. I think there's about half a dozen of them. And under that subcategory, asbestos, there'll be some asbestos monitoring done. Bear in mind, we didn't find a hell of a lot of asbestos poking around there, but we know it's there. We've seen it. We found it before, but it's not like everywhere you stand, you'll see some asbestos. So, but regardless, there will be monitoring done for dust and asbestos. The controls on dust obviously be a lot of water wetting down the roads, controlling any runoff, but just keeping the dust down. That's why we want to get it done now. Contamination, very broad term there, but we haven't found a lot of real nasty stuff, some hydrocarbons and heavy metals and bits and pieces. But as we find it, we'll deal with it. A lot of it's, we're trying to keep what we can on site. And so unless it's just really horrific, we'll keep it on site and it'll stay where it is. We've had monitoring wells. We don't have groundwater up there, but that's part of contamination. We got a ring of monitoring wells, groundwater monitoring wells around this thing. And that's we've had them there for over 10 years, and there's not a lot of stuff in the groundwater. So that tells me that the landfill itself didn't really have a lot of nasties that are leaching into groundwater and migrating away. So I don't see all this work that we're doing will change that because it's all above the water table. It's above any area where you would be causing more of a release. So I'm pretty comfortable with groundwater. Similar with landfill gas, we got a ring of wells, landfill gas wells around the property. So we're comfortable with the gas generation capacity of this old landfill, obviously, because there's a lot of sand and whatnot. Most of the gas kind of just goes straight up into the atmosphere, and it has historically. What little bit's there in the ground, we haven't really picked up any alarming readings at all for landfill gas, so we're not too overly concerned about that. But we do have a heavy monitoring program for landfill gas as we go at the surface and in the wells around the project. And I guess with gas, it would link possibly to odor. If you get enough landfill gas, you'll get odor, but there's not a lot of like nasty patriciables you would expect odor to come from, like garbage waste. This is more like C and D and a few bits and pieces. So it shouldn't be very smelly, but that'll be one of the things we're sort of keeping an eye on as well. Vibration and noise, those are controlled through mostly Ross's processes, and traffic's not, that's not really my issue, except for the trucks running up and down inside the site, making sure the ground's wet and the trucks are covered, and other measures that are in the CEMP. So that's some of the things to look at. Jamie, I got any more slides there, or am I
Yep, just this one here, managed construction impacts.
okay? The project ramp has been accepted. Yep. I've already explained that. They're also reviewed by health. I've explained that. So I kind of did this out of order. I apologize. I
Okay.
just did it in a way that seemed logical, but my
Yeah,
logic
perfect.
doesn't always match up with everybody else's. Commencing the wrap. Or so. Yeah, I think that's all been covered there. I think
Yep. Okay.
that,
I think
that might be,
yep, no,
yeah.
touched on that. Okay, and then just finally, in terms of how the community can help it.
How the community, well, speak up, ask questions. I see there's 3 or 4 questions that popped up. Speak up and be part of the project. If you're unsure what's going on, ask. If you see things, smell things, hear things that concern you, let us know. The the whole purpose of this is to have a better result for the local community and a better use of that land in a time where land is needed. So because you are the community, your interaction is welcomed. We're not no one would be shying away from it, but they would want you to be a part of it, to help ensure that it's a smooth process, because the process will be going on for several years. So please, you'll have more than one opportunity to say good day and say what's on your mind, or ask questions or whatever. So I think that's the main way to help.
Yeah, excellent, fantastic. So if you've got any questions at all for Charlie and also Ross, the earlier presenter, please make sure you put them in the Q&A. As I said, if we don't get to answering them this evening, then certainly we'll keep them and we'll respond to all the questions that are being asked on the Facebook and also the project's website. So now I'm just going to finish off by talking a little bit about project communications. So the project has adopted a proactive approach to engaging with residents and stakeholders. We understand that you are concerned about the project, and that there is already a good chance that we have spoken with someone in your household or business. For a couple of years now, we have been door knocking along Adelaide Street, trying to make sure that we have everybody's contact details. So one of our roles is to ensure that your feedback is considered by the project's leadership when they are making their decisions. So please, as Charlie has indicated, make contact with us, and I'll talk about how you do that. It's not a case of us just simply answering the phone call and writing down a statistic. We are interested in what you're saying, and certainly if we see a trend or something like that emerge in terms of issues, then we push for the decision makers in the project to consider those issues and to look at what might need to change to address those. Ideally, we'll be in a situation where there won't be any issues and everything will go perfectly well. But I suspect there'll always be something that is an issue that somebody wants to raise, and hopefully we'll be available to address that. The project website, I've mentioned that on several occasions already. That is available to you. There's information about the project. There's current and past project updates available for download from the website. We do have information sheets on key project topics. A lot of those topics have been spoken about tonight. You can go and download those information sheets and get additional information. There is frequently asked questions on that website, and also information about how you can get in contact with us. We also have our Facebook page. So again, that has information about the project. It has links to the new project updates that we put out. We try and do one every couple of months. Information broadcast as well. So information, for instance, about the webinar this evening, and also information about how you can get in contact with us. And then finally, our contact details. So we do have a mobile phone. Now that mobile phone isn't always answered immediately, and that's principally because the project isn't actually really operating yet. But once it is, then that phone will be held by somebody, and will be promptly answered. There's an email address that you can email your questions through to, or any queries or concerns that you've got. That's info@hazelmerehub.com.au. And as I've mentioned, there's both the website and the Facebook page. All of that, if you don't have that information, if you have received letterbox drops from us, all of these contact details are included on the bottom of everything that we will have put in your letterbox or handed to you in person. Okay, so now time for questions and answers, and I do have a couple of questions that have come through. The first question relates to the amount of vegetation that's going to be removed. Ross, are you able to respond to that?
Yeah, no worries. So I think the key point I sort of made during my discussion was that the way we plan to approach a job is progressively. So we're going to start at the western end and slowly move our way across the site, not open up any more ground than we need to. Obviously, we do need to cover the entire ground, but the main purpose behind doing that is to just not go and bowl all the vegetation over in one hit. So the amount of vegetation being taken out, as I said, it will be progressive. And then I think, yeah, in Josh's presentation, he mentioned there's the buffer. Maybe you want to touch on that, Josh. Yeah, between the residential strip and that buffer between there and the commercial area. Yeah, maybe you want to touch on that, mate.
Yeah, look, I mean, the current concept, the proposal that's being developed is a tree planting zone between the residential interface and the commercial, the industrial development behind it. And as part of that planning, we made sure there was sufficient space and width to the buffer zone to plant the largest trees that could potentially be put there. So a substantial tree planting zone all the way along. In addition to that, the concept also includes additional verge trees along Adelaide Street, which will further improve the interface.
Josh, while you're there, did you want to quickly touch on a question about future data centers in the area?
Yeah, so look, and I don't want this to sound like I'm avoiding the question, but at this stage in the process, it's the site is planned for light industrial development, and that includes things like light industrial development. By definition, is development which doesn't cause an impact on residents that are the community. Heavy industry is land uses which cause an impact. So, there is no plans for any kind of specific development where it's being pursued for industrial development. The question of whether a data center is permitted on the site is a question further down the road as to whether the planning decision makers allow that form of development in the light industry zone, I guess. So it's neither a no, it's neither a yes. It's what I'm trying to get to the point of is the form of development that'll be there will not impact the community, otherwise it won't be allowed there.
Excellent. Thanks, Josh. There's a couple of questions here, Charlie. They're probably in your area, just around toxic materials and the management of toxic materials. I'm going to sort of try to bound these up, but I'll also just remind people as well, there is a hazardous materials management information sheet on the website, and the types of toxic materials are listed on the website in that information sheet. So I encourage you to go and have a look at that. Charlie, the question is, what are the toxic materials that are on site? How are they going to be managed? And I suppose as a part of that, if they do need to be transported off-site, where do they go?
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good questions there. They so far, like what, and there's been a lot of testing over the years, and there hadn't been a whole lot of real nasty stuff there. Different types of hydrocarbons, oils, fuels, lubricants, that sort of thing. Um, there's been so those that comes in a lot of different. Um, there's a lot of different uh, contaminants within that catch-all phrase there, but the most of them been petroleum hydrocarbons. We haven't found really any chlorinated hydrocarbons. The people in the group may be aware of the difference. The petroleum hydrocarbons tend to float on the water surface because they're lighter than water, whereas chlorinated hydrocarbons are like degreasers and things of that nature. They sink. They go uh, they go down below the groundwater table and then migrate. And particularly in a sandy environment, they can go quite deep, but oftentimes will go beyond the depth of mattering, but not all the time. So there's probably going to be some solvents in there, but we haven't really found any to be concerned about. Um, so you got those groups of hydrocarbons and chlorinated hydrocarbons, petroleum hydrocarbons. Um, and those are common with, motor vehicles, oils, all the standard uses. Asbestos in different pockets, in different forms. We haven't really come across, from my mind, any friable, but there's a lot of ACM or potential ACM. And so usually if there's enough ACM, there'll be some stuff that's loose. So asbestos would be one of the other ones. Various heavy metals that come out of industrial processes would be are sort of there, but not again, not in real bad quantities. Um, Landfills like this generate landfill gas, and the landfill gas, the primary concern is methane. A little bit of methane detected, not much, but methane goes bang. So you got to be careful with methane. CO2 can suffocate you, and hydrogen sulfide. We haven't found any on this site. Is particularly nasty, but less common, but certainly shows up there. And I think they might have found a little PFAS, but nothing to speak of. Again, concentrations reasonable, and I think most of the wells didn't have it in there or had concentrations that were not alarming. So that what we found there is not overly bad, and it's going to stay there unless it's uncovered and it's not safe to keep it there. And then it'll just have to be loaded up uh, and licensed and transported or transported under licensed conditions to a licensed facility. Depending on what it is, will depend on where it goes.
Mhm.
It's,
Thanks, Charlie. The question around how trucks are accessing the site, and I suppose if I can preface this, and perhaps then Ross or Josh, you might want to add to it. So an undertaking very early in the job was made to the community that we wouldn't be using Adelaide Street for the transit of vehicles related to the project and for the long-term development, and hence the idea of access via Stirling Crescent that has been actively explored. So that means that once the site has actually been built, all access then comes off Stirling Crescent into the industrial estate. There won't be vehicles or anything coming down Adelaide Street related to this lot in the future. In terms of the actual um, uh, construction remediation work, there will be some use of Adelaide Street initially. Certainly, the large vehicles and plant will need to be what's called floated. They'll be transported to site. That will be via Adelaide Street because there is no other existing access to the lot other than Adelaide Street at this stage. So while those vehicles are all being transported and basically everything's still being built, then Adelaide Street will need to be used. But as soon as that access through to Stirling Crescent is created, then basically that becomes the primary access to the site. Josh, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, that was correct. The distinction between future industrial activity will not occur from Adelaide Street, trucks and so on. Yes, that's correct. And maybe just some additional information for the community that future road that will provide that industrial access is will be infrastructure delivered by the City of Swan. So that's currently being actively negotiated with the City of Swan and the other landowners to get that road through at the soonest possible time to resolve the uncertainty.
Yeah. And Ross, in terms of your the construction activity, is there anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I did sort of just breeze over it earlier, but the way we intend to bring the gear onto site, it'll be quite staggered. We're not just going to just throw everything at it at one hit. So the equipment will be coming onto site bit by bit as it's required. We don't intend to have a huge amount of equipment there, to be honest. There might be half a dozen machines that need floating in. The day-to-day vehicle traffic operators, etc. They'll be coming in on the western end of the site. They'll have a designated parking area, as we talked about. As far as practical, we'll use the eastern end of the site. We'll have another entry point there, and where possible, that's where we'll direct the heavy loads, if we can. And then Charlie made the point that majority of what we should find on site, that we don't expect there to be a need to have too many trucks coming off and on site during the construction phase. The majority of what is on site will stay on site, and basically anything we pull up out of the ground will, unless it's toxic and it can't stay there, majority of what we're working with will stay within the confounds of the property. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of disruption, maybe like I said, in the early phases, and then at the end of the job when we're demobbing from site. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you, Ross. Now I understand the link to the information sheets that I've been referring to has been put in the chat online. So if you're not familiar with the website, you can click on that link and that will take you through to the Hazelmere Hub website. Now, I don't have any more questions on my list. Carrie, if you're there, Carrie, are there any other questions that you'd like to bring forward? Nope. Carrie's
I
silence.
think you've covered, the most
sorry.
part of it. There's quite a long list from Glenn Cooper that probably
Okay.
need to be dissected into different sections, but I think you've
Yeah,
covered.
there's a couple I could answer directly for
Thanks.
Glenn if you would like me to. But Glenn, we did send the City of Kalamunda a copy of the CEMP. If you can check, and if it's not there, we can send another link. And yes, it's Robin Smollerak we're dealing with at DWER.
Cool.
And
Excellent.
then there's a question: will the residents in the future be able to dig into the ground? Yeah, the ground. If once we sign off and say if it gets to that point that's suitable for residential, by all means they'll be able to dig. There'll be if they can't dig in the ground, I wouldn't be able to recommend reclassification for residential.
Okay. Excellent. Fantastic.
So,
Thank you very much, Charlie. As Carrie has said, there's obviously some other questions there. We will pick those up and respond to those over the next couple of weeks. And those responses will be available publicly on our Facebook page and also the website. Please, if you do have any other queries or questions, if you know your other residents, you're having conversations with friends or family and they missed the webinar this evening, the webinar will be available to view on the project website, but also people are more than welcome to make contact with the project, send us an email, give us a phone call, and we're happy to answer questions. Thank you very much for spending this evening with us, and we wish you all the best. Thank you.